And now, here's your host of Shaping Success, Wes Tankersley.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to Shaping Success with myself and Robert Watson. Before we get fired up, I just want to make sure that we say thank you to our Patreon supporters. If you're joining Patreon, we have Anna Mellon, Wendell Fernandez, and Nikki Pav. Nikki is in the chat room here. If you guys want to hang out or you want to, jump in on that Patreon, please go help support the show. Subscribe here on TikTok. The best thing you can do is interact with the comments, and you can also listen to the podcast or watch it wherever it is and make sure that you are interacting, because that is the free thing to do. If you want to help for free, or if you feel monetarily you want to help the show, you definitely can do that as well. But thank you for doing that to our Patreons. Robert, good morning. Some changes in the country this morning. Well, they won't take place until January, but we've kind of got an idea of what's going on, right?
Absolutely. And so, that's literally where I was. I was fielding calls. I just talked to Europe, and we've been fielding calls since, I guess, 6 o'clock last night, because we kind of knew how the exit polling was looking, and we just were wondering how it was all going to fall out. So it came out pretty much as expected, and it's actually going to be, again, depending on how the numbers actually flush out, it's going to be both an electoral college victory and a popular vote victory.
Yeah, and that's what it looks like. I mean, he definitely won the electoral college, but looking at the popular vote, I mean, he's ahead by quite a bit, right?
Yeah, but he's going to lose a lot of ground when California starts reporting the votes, because it's about a 60-40 there, and so there's probably going to be about 2 million of his gap that's going to evaporate. He's got about a 4 million vote lead. It probably will evaporate some of it, about half of it.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy to see how that goes, though. I mean, it's amazing to me that you could kind of see how it was going. It's still like you worked this year. You said you were working the other day. You're working a little bit on the Oregon election, and obviously they're still. I was just looking at the map. They're blue.
Yeah, and it was basically just nonpartisan, get out the vote. Trying to get people, especially in rural communities and coastal towns, trying to get their voices activated, not caring partisan one way or another. We just want America to speak.
Yeah,
we believe that when everybody speaks, we get exactly what we're supposed to get.
Yep.
And so what was surprising was some of the measures in Oregon were, wow. Yeah, that was surprising. So.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about this the other day, because I grew up in Oregon, like that's where I went to high school and all that stuff. Right. But I went to Eastern Oregon, so like right across the border, because I live in Idaho, and moved into Idaho as an adult. And there's a big section of Oregon that doesn't think the way that the rest of them does, but it doesn't matter, because if you don't vote, your voice is not heard. And I think that a lot of times, I can't remember what I was talking to, or I was listening to something the other day, and they were talking about something that Reagan did in California that basically cemented California as being blue for the rest of the, forever, because they're never going to really change with immigration, how he handled it or something. And you just kind of know there's these states that are that way. But the problem that I hate about the Electoral College is that when you do look at that, you see that there is, and I think we've talked about this before, there's like 3 cities that have such a population in California. There's one in Oregon. Washington's kind of the same way. I feel like there's these little populous pockets get to make the decision for the whole state. It's almost like, I know they don't just hand out statehood to everywhere, but it's almost like, hey, these places believe this way. They need to become their own state, but they're big enough to. They have enough population to be a whole state.
Right. And I think what was so indicative last night, because I turned in and got into the Trump campaign, and they had flipped over to CNN, and they were literally at Mar-a-Lago were watching CNN, because CNN was starting to basically say what everybody knew was, whether you like it or whether you don't, it's the economy, stupid. Yeah. And if the economy and the inflation that we've experienced in the last 4 years, whether he's totally responsible for it, his administration, or not, it doesn't matter. You get saddled with the bad times and you get blamed. You're the chief executive. I mean, that's the way it goes.
Yeah.
And so basically she could not outrun the economy, no matter what you think of her policies or whatever. 4 years of well, my gosh, depending on where you were, 25% inflation over 4 years,
Yeah.
something like that. And really noticeable. And they were making the comment early on that they said, she's going to carry women. And I said, no, she's not as well as you think. And they said, why? I said, because they go to the grocery store.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm not saying just women singularly go to the grocery store, but women go to the grocery store. And that's, I know what has happened to my basket of stuff.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm not trying to say that the new guy, the Trump's going to come in and he's going to alleviate the problem. But the fact of the matter is, you're going to get blamed for that kind of inflation in my grocery basket.
Right.
That's just the way it goes. So that's what had happened. And CNN was picking up on that, just said, listen, she's going to have a very, very difficult time outrunning the administration's action on inflation. Exactly.
I
And
think
so the rest of it was just conversation.
Yeah, and it's funny. It was to me like I feel like at this age, like I've probably paid more attention. I think a lot of people did to this election than they have any other ones because they really want to know what's going on. I watched 3 debates this year, which I'd never watched a vice presidential one, which I did because it's interesting to see what's going on. I watched the 2 debates, one between Biden, which kind of dropped out, and then Trump, and then. There's a lot of things that just kind of bugged me about the whole thing anyway, because you can't really, no matter what party you're from, if what happened with her, she's in trouble anyway, because if what happened with her happened to the GOP, it would have been the same thing. It'd been like, I would have thought the same way. How can you trust someone to come in without actually really being elected? And then everyone starts coming out with all this stuff like, well, we picked Biden, so that's the same as picking her or this and that and blah, blah, blah. It's like, right. Had they done, like, I feel like when they gambled on that, they gambled wrong anyway, because had they done it the right way, we might have had a different result, right?
Yeah, and I think, to be honest with you, I think she ran a good campaign as far as campaigns goes. I think she did fine. I think she just had a very difficult time trying to figure out who she was versus the last 4 years. In other words, what are you going to do that's so different? Why should I pick you? What course correction can you make to bail us out of this inflation that we've experienced? What can you do? And I think it just wasn't clear enough to everybody, articulated enough. And the other side had it easy. Are you better off in the 4 years that I was in, or the 4 years that I wasn't? I mean, that becomes a very easy argument for, ouch, that kind of hurt. And so I think that's where we as Americans have to settle down and stop being so partisan and start realizing things like, hey, we're in this together. We all go to the same grocery store.
Right.
Okay. We pay the same, gasoline. I mean, I found out what you in Oregon and Iowa pay for gas, right?
Yeah.
I'm in Texas. It's different. I mean, you guys pay a lot.
Yeah, well, you just walk down to the oil field and fill up your car.
Pretty much. we go to the local thing and just pull up, right?
Yeah, we got it a little bit more difficult. They got to truck it all here. It's funny. We always have that argument. Gas prices go up in Idaho. There's always this. They tell you why, and it's always because the way it has to get here is difficult. Like it's not. There's no like straight shot. There's no oil fields really around here. There's no. It has to come from you. It has to come from Canada. It has to come from far away. So we're not as much as California, though. Like that's the other thing that I don't understand is like, how can people be complacent with like when gas was high here? Cause it's kind of gone down a little bit. It's still over $3 a gallon, but when it was $4 a gallon here, it was $8 in California. It's like, how can you be okay with that? And then, there's just these things that like, to me, it's a lot of common sense in my mind. If you have to have rolling blackouts in the summer because you don't have a grid big enough to power electric stuff, but you want everyone to have electric stuff, you probably ought to work on your infrastructure a little bit before you start requiring those things. So I think that's the toughest part with anything that anyone does. It's like, if you're going to say that something has to be done, have a plan, and there's no plan there for that.
Right. And it's one of the weirdest things was, I think it was about 3 years ago, I found out, and again, I'm fairly learned, but there's so many things. One of the things is as you get older, you just realize how little you know. We import electricity. Mm-hmm. And somebody would go, what? Yeah, from Mexico and Canada.
Yeah.
And I was just like, Okay, and so we import electricity, not a tremendous amount, but we do. Now, the interesting thing is all this technology, right? For example, Bitcoin, right?
Yeah.
All the mining operations do what? Demand power.
Yep.
AI is a power hog, right?
Hmm.
So now you've got all these power hogs, and our infrastructure, our grid, for example, is not the way it should be. Now, listen, that's not about Democrat or Republican. That's
Yeah.
about who has a plan. Okay, who's going to solve this? Because you really do have to get your ducks in a row if you want to be competitive the next 50 years forward.
Yeah, and I realize that we do mine power. It's funny how we mine power from certain places because Idaho is one of those places.
Mhm.
Like there is a dam that is, I don't know, probably about 30 minutes from here that is owned by the state of Washington. So they, as the water goes through and turns the turbines, they send that power to Washington, but it's in Idaho. They have the contract on it. So, I mean, that's a crazy thing. But if you don't have the infrastructure to store that, and just like you're talking about,
Yeah.
like these Bitcoin mines in Kuna, Idaho, they just built a server for Facebook. And does everyone know what a server is? Like, does anyone have any idea what that is? It's like electricity, right? They need all this storage to store the data. It's like the cloud storage or whatever. It's where your crap goes. So
Mhm.
it's like the cloud. It goes up in the cloud, you know?
Yeah.
But anyway, that's the thing. Like you have to have power in order to do that. And they have to have the infrastructure. You know, I look at Idaho, the roads with the population here has gone up so fast, so quickly from people fleeing places that are not like Idaho to get here. And, you know, it's like we have 5 seasons here and one of them is running long and that's construction season. Like it never stops now. So we have construction going on. They're trying to build a freeway. They're trying to build a highway. They're trying to widen things. They're trying to make it so that we can have that here. And it just has to do with planning. I feel like if you know that this is coming, then you probably ought to plan a little bit better. And if you want electric vehicles in every single household, then you probably ought to make that. I mean, when we built our house, we put in the 220 that you need because we might be forced into an electric car someday, you know?
Well, the thing about COVID is I didn't realize, but I was looking back at a planning document from 1950, and I wrote about this, where in 1950 they said and the population was 180 million, we needed 1.3 million beds,
Mm-hmm.
hospital beds, right? We have 900,000 hospital beds right now for 330 million people. What was wrong with COVID was, yes, the disease spread very fast. The problem was it hospitalized a percentage of the population that exceeded the bed capacity.
Yep.
And where did it exceed the bed capacity? In the cities, because the urban centers were too dense for the hospital load. And
Yeah.
how did we know this? Because they were wrong in 1950 and it just progressively got worse. Back to your planning issue. This
Yep.
really wasn't about COVID's lethality. This was about the fact that COVID put a lot of people in hospital. We didn't
Yep.
have the hospital capacity. So were they doing the right thing? Yeah, because you can't have people in the middle of hallways. But it goes back to the original issue. Why did you screw it up in the first place? You knew what you needed and you didn't do it. What was that? Well, we could take the land public, put a hospital on it, or sell it to a developer.
Yep.
So guess what happened?
Made the money.
Made money,
Yep.
sold it to the developer. Whether you like that or whether you don't, you do have to realize that we're talking about the idea that our public officials are not planning properly.
Right.
That these people that we're electing to office, now you got to remember, this is not just at the federal level. This isn't President Biden's mistake. Okay,
Yeah.
this is done at the state and local level too. We're not doing the kind of planning and we're not doing the kind of integration that we need to. North Carolina, when they went through the hurricane issue, right? Nobody knew who was on first. I
Yep.
knew lots of people that were on the ground there. There was complete confusion. They didn't get assets. You have great lift capabilities setting down in Fayetteville. Guess what happened? They just sat. They waited for orders because you can't mobilize active duty military in a state. You're not allowed.
Yeah.
You have to suspend posse comitatus. The governor has to ask for help. It's silly, but this is the lack of planning and organization we have from our leaders.
Yep.
This is what we need to say. Again, don't blame President Biden for this. He doesn't determine what you do at the state level. This is your governor. This is your state and state senators and state congressmen. Folks, we need to get this stuff right.
I don't know what a Texas ballot looks like, but to put this in perspective, to think about this, okay? You think about what was on your ballot if you voted, which everyone should vote. And no matter what way you vote, everyone should vote. That's all there is to it. But think about your ballot. My ballot was 2 pages, 2 long pages, 2 things that you had to vote for that were on a federal level, and everything else was a local government level. So if you don't go give your input on that situation, just like I was talking about earlier, where I told my little brother who finally voted this year and bitched about every other election as long as he's been an adult, but didn't vote. I said, good. Now you have the opportunity to bitch because you did what you were supposed to do. You can't bitch about it if you don't try to make a change. That's all there is to it. And that's the way I feel about it. It's like, if you didn't vote, then don't complain about the next 4 years. You had the opportunity to make your voice be heard, and you did not do it.
Right. And be sensitive to the fact that presidents don't dictate what states do.
Yep.
And so at the state, like you talked about that ballot, there were only a couple things at the federal level. Everything else was at the state and local level.
Yep.
And be cognizant of down ballot, please. Be cognizant of dog catcher and councilmen and things, because these people affect the quality of your life. Okay? This is stuff we need to pay attention to. And to be honest with you, we took civics, the concept of what you do in a civil society, we took civics out of high schools, right?
Yep.
And this puts us in a position of not understanding how our government works. And I don't mean government as in the big G in Washington, D.C. I mean government in the little g that works at your state house.
Yeah.
This is a big deal. We need to be cognizant as citizens to make a difference in our communities.
You got to know what's on there too. Like, it's funny because, like, as I say that, there was a bunch of things on the Idaho ballot, and I'm just going to talk about that because that's what I know. But there was one constitutional proposition on the back that they wanted to change the Constitution to do. You were talking about ranked elections or something like that, and they're like, "This is what this is about. This is all it's about. We don't want to do this." And then you drive around and it's don't Californianize Idaho's elections, blah 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 blah.
Right.
And this is all it's about. But you read that ballot and, like, I think the whole back page on that was that one thing. But they packed in there, just like they do with all these bills, where they in the federal level, they packed in 3 or 4 different things that were affected. It wasn't just the ranked choice ballot, but that's all they were talking about. And it's like, if you don't know the information, then you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, because now you can vote yes, and it can affect all of these things. You know, you know, like you hear the federal government complaining about that bill that Trump was like, we're not doing this. And everyone's like blaming him on the immigration bill that didn't get passed. But packed in there was giving more money to all these places that we shouldn't be giving. They were going to give like $50 million more to Ukraine. And it's like, we got problems here. So that totally makes sense. Like, if we have problems here, I would rather that $50 million go to immigration reform to take care of this country than to go to another country to take care of their country, you know? And that makes sense. But if people want to say, you know, like, because they don't do the research, that this is what happened. And so it's that can happen on a state level too. And this constitutional thing, like I was telling you about, it's the same thing, you know?
Right. And then and we need to have our bills come through the state and federal government as clean bills, not earmarked to death, right? Yeah. Not all this other stuff thrown in. Hey, clean bill, this is what it's about. You want your voice heard, and I have every empathy for people that want a specific issue, that are issue driven. It's very, very hard to get your issue driven all the way through to legislation because it gets played with so much. So that's what we all are desiring, something that's a little bit more transparent, less politics, and a little bit more leadership. I think we would probably all say, because we do elect these people to be our leaders, and you know, we would like leadership. And there's so much game playing that, that we don't understand, that people get frustrated. And I get it. I get that you got frustrated and you don't want to be part of the political process. But that's a cop out, and it's an expensive one
Yeah.
because you have to pay the bill irregardless, right? That 25% or 30% inflation in your grocery cart is paid by everybody.
I mean,
It's not paid by the people that just vote.
yeah. And that's the thing. And I think that most people don't understand that, like, because everyone always looks at like people who make a lot of money. Oh, they're rich. They don't have a problem with this, blah, 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 blah. But if it's happening to you, it's happening to them too. Oh, they don't pay their fair share in taxes, but they do, because they're paying it in a different way than you are. The fact of the matter is that they're able to put it where they want to put it. Like for taxes, like me, it's like, I wish that the more than half in taxes of my pay that I get would go somewhere that I wanted it to go, not to wherever everyone else voted where it went. Like, I feel like, I don't know, taxes is one of those deals where, like, if I wanted to donate half my salary because they're telling me I have to something, I would pick a cause, not their cause is, so it's tough.
And there's a frustration, my friend, my incredible friend who lives in Oregon, that's what she says all the time. She just says, hey, I don't like paying taxes because I don't like where it goes.
Yeah.
And I said, no, I get it. I mean, but that is back to deciding that you're going to make an impact at the state and federal level. You can make an impact. Listen, you can groundswell an issue at the local level.
Right.
And it can become a national issue. You just have to remember that you're going to have to put in the effort. Nothing's free. Mm-hmm. I used to love people, and I said, you know what NFL stands for? And they said, National Football League. I said, no free lunch. That's what it stands for. There isn't a free lunch in any of this. You don't get to just ride other people's coattails. You actually have to get out and do stuff. Yep. Again, I was very involved in this election and just trying to get people's vote out.
Right.
I didn't really care about which side you picked. I just wanted you to get a vote out, like you said, so that you felt like you had a stake in the game.
Yeah.
That your voice was heard. And I think and I'm hoping that when we look at these numbers from the national election, I hope we see, a greatly improved participation rate.
Yeah.
That's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see that more people were involved in this decision, not less.
Yeah, and I think that that's the big thing. I think that, no matter what happened, if you don't like it, did you do what you were supposed to do to help that happen? If you don't like the outcome, did you do what you needed to do? And that's it. Your part is to vote. And if you did not vote, then stop complaining because you did not do your part. And I don't know. That's it. So.
Yeah. And one of the things we were talking about in media, and we can do this to kind of close things, but we're talking about media and the impact. And I said, that when these big legacy medias miss things, like the big networks are not really paying attention, it's because media hasn't become democratized. You and I are online and we have a voice. Now, granted, maybe not that many people watch what we do, but here's the thing. We've got a voice and it's out there. And if it gets picked up, it gets picked up. Mm-hmm. But at least we have it out there. We're not being suppressed. We're not waiting for NBC or ABC or CBS to call us and ask us on their show. We've got our own, right?
Yeah. No, I'm just laughing because I'm just waiting for TikTok. I got a TikTok will do whatever they want. They'll censor us. They censored us last week. I didn't tell you about it, but they had one where they're like, nope, you can't talk about that. And then I got one strike. I'm like, this is my first strike ever in 4 years because I can't remember what it was we said, but I can't remember. It didn't matter. It wasn't even something that was, they didn't like what we said about something. I was just like, this is stupid. Like, and your video has been disqualified from the creator fund and this and that and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I have to say, I don't think we say anything that's really contentious on here.
No, they do some weird stuff though. Like we were on Jay and I did so on the One Drink Wednesday TikTok. Jay and I did something, and he said something about hippie lettuce, but he didn't say hippie lettuce. He said something else, and they like started monitoring us. Like you could see it in the bottom. It's like, can't say that. You've been censored. You're blah blah blah. It's like it's weird to me. Whatever. I don't care. Yeah. YouTube suppressing people for doing things that are saying things that they don't like because Google's this big old conglomerate. And you could see kind of like last night watching everything that's going on. I flipped between, like, my problem is I don't care. Like, the news is very one-sided whatever side it's on. There's no in
Right.
between. There is nothing in between anymore. Like, I was watching, I don't have the local channels because I just have streaming services like a lot of people do. And
Right.
what's going on, Carl? And I can't remember what it was, but like I have Utah News, which is Fox, and then I have Samsung has its own TV, which I think was ABC, and then Hulu has CBS, and like you just I finally like got done listening to all the rhetoric that was going on between them. I just turned the volume off and just watched the map. That's what I was doing. Like I could have just done that on my phone, but it's so annoying because they're supposed to be objective, and they inject all of their rhetoric into it. Like they inject their thoughts on everything, and it's insane to have a panel that is all one way and then to have a panel that's all the other way. Like there's no like, let's have 3 and 3, let's have 3 conservatives and 3 liberals or Democrats all on the same thing so that they can talk about it and have an actual conversation. But that wasn't the way it was. You had one or the other. And
Yeah, and it was so fascinating last night. So my buddy asked me what I was watching, and I said I had the AP map up. I wanted to see how AP called things. And I actually was streaming Mar-Lago, right, who was watching CNN. So the
which
Mar-Lago
is weird.
crowd, right, they had flipped over from Fox to CNN. And I was like, okay, so I was watching CNN via Mar-Lago.
Yeah.
I had it up on the screen going, y'all are really paying attention. Yeah, they were, because they were seeing that CNN was trying to cushion the blow. And this was early, right?
Yeah.
When they were seeing how the voting in Virginia was doing. And again, I was just going, yeah, but CNN, again, not trying to be one way or another, but CNN was actually being very straightforward last night.
Yeah.
It was like, here's the issues, here's the problems, here's the challenges that we're facing, here's what's happening. I thought the analysis was good. I mean, not that I was really paying that much attention. I was still paying attention to, I knew what the outstanding votes were, and I knew what some of the exit polling was in these major cities. So I was watching how long it would take them to flip Georgia and North Carolina, for example, and Pennsylvania, because I knew what the exit polling looked like.
Yeah.
And the exit polling was way down from the previous year. And I knew that Trump had carried more in every one of those areas than everybody expected. So I'm just kind of curious as to see what they would do. And as my son told me when he called from Europe, he said, hey, they just declared it. I said, well, you could have called me at 7 o'clock last night and I could have told you.
Yeah.
But he said, 10 hours later, I said, we knew 7 o'clock last night.
Yep. Well, I think that, we talked about this a couple weeks ago. We've talked about this off and on, that the world did not end. It is what it is. Now, my hope is that, we have to, hope and pray that this administration can get things together, because they have a tough job as well. They have to prove that they earned what they got, and that's all there is to it. And so hopefully we can see that happen. And if you don't like the outcome, it is what it is. Hopefully you voiced your vote. You went out there, you did what you needed to do. You did your civic duty. You voted for what you wanted to. You paid attention to all the local things and know that, your voice was heard. And, the nice thing is no matter what it is, the majority of the country has spoken about what they want, and this is what we get. And so now hopefully they do what they need to do.
Yeah, and I want to remind everybody that Joe Biden is my president right now.
Yep.
He's my president. I only have one president at a time, okay?
Right.
And that the reality is that when Mr. Trump is back in a president, he will be my president. I serve my presidents the same way I have since Jimmy Carter. Who's ever in office is my president. Now,
Yep.
I separate the president from the policy. If anybody that I love as a president has a bad policy, I'm going to tell you about it.
Yep.
At least from my perspective. I'm not saying that I'm right, but I separate the two, right? Because guys who I greatly admire as leaders can have a bad policy,
Yep.
at least from my vantage point.
And remember that it doesn't matter if you have a difference of opinion from someone. That does not make you instant enemies. Be able to have an educational or a civil conversation about whatever it is. And if you don't agree to disagree, and still keep it that way. That's all there is to it.
The old adage says we can disagree without being disagreeable,
Yep.
right? And the thing about debate in a public square is it's healthy, because I've walked into debates where I thought I knew my position. When I listened to somebody else tell it from their way, I went, okay, I still believe what I believe, but boy, I sure understand your side of it.
Yep.
And I didn't before. And that's one of the reasons we have debates, so that I can understand your side, so that maybe there's a compromise that we can find, because I do understand your side of the perspective.
Well, I look forward to getting back to some motivational conversations. This is finally over, and hopefully we can continue to keep moving forward. Thank you, everyone, for hanging out. If you want to support the show, the best way to do it is to make sure that you follow us, like, share, comment on posts. You can also join the Patreon for as little as $2, $3 a month to support the show. Subscribe here. We will be here 2 days a week for the longevity of however long we can hold up. Then you can catch it anywhere you listen to podcasts. Subscribe to the YouTube Shaping Success with Wes Tankersley, and we will see you guys on Monday.
Have a great week.
You too. All right, everyone. Thanks for hanging out here on TikTok. We will see you next time.